Hare Krishna. Jai Jagannath. So my name is Govinda Devdas, and this video is especially for my friends and family, the German devotees, the German community, but in general the whole ISKCON community or Western devotees, and in general anybody who has come across the topic that arose just yesterday, especially concerning the Jagannath Temple in Jagannath Puri. Because there has been reports that are very exaggerated. So here I would just like to tell you what really happened and explain a little bit my point of view on this whole situation. And so like that, yes. So I'm right now in Delhi and I'm safe and happy. So there was no real danger at any point actually for me, in case you were concerned. And as you can see, I'm in the ISKCON Temple in Delhi, and also on the left side you can see this famous landmark, the Lotus Temple. So yes, so what did actually really happen? So one report was saying that I was trying to enter through every gate, I was barging into the temple, I was I don't know, storming the temple, something like that. And on the way, the priest stopping me, and I just beating the priest with a stick. So yes, in case you took that seriously, and maybe you even thought it was funny or you liked it, it did not happen like that at all. I did not storm into the temple, I did not barge into the temple, I did not try to enter through every gate. So I will start a little bit further back in 2006 when I came the first time to the Jagannath Puri temple. So that time there had been a report or a message, news, that the temple had finally opened for Western devotees after such a long time. We know that when Srila Prabhupada visited Jagannath Puri, he actually was not very pleased with the situation that they would not allow his disciples to enter. And I'm not sure if that's true, but I even heard that he then said that he will also not enter, unless his disciples are allowed to enter. I think that is accurate, if I remember right. So like that. So when we heard this news, the brahmacharis in Berlin and Leipzig, but especially the brahmacharis in Berlin, we rushed to Jagannath Puri, basically speaking, to gain the darshan of Lord Jagannath, in his hometown. But unfortunately, the reports were not true, and we could not enter the temple. We could not take darshan. But then, since I was taking japa walks every day along the beach, I had become really dark. So Krishna Chaitanya, very dear friend from Berlin, he suggested, why don't you enter the temple? You look so dark now, you might pass as an Indian, So I decided to try on Ekadashi day. So I went into the main gate and just pretended I didn't know, and I just walked in. But I only went like maybe 3 meters, 4 meters past the guards, and then they noticed, and then they asked me to come out again, and they showed me the sign, only Orthodox Hindus allowed. So this is the official, you could say, stand, and the official, sign as well. So the question, of course, then is, what is an Orthodox Hindu? What is an Orthodox Hindu? So the word Orthodox, of course, implies somebody who's following actually a tradition very strictly. That's what actually the word Orthodox really means. Something who's really serious about following a tradition. No compromise. That's what the word Orthodox means. Very traditional. So yes, but of course their definition of Orthodox Hindu is that anybody who's born a Hindu, that's Orthodox Hindu. And it doesn't really matter, how strictly the person is following any form of, you could say, purity, or if he has any spiritual practice, that is, secondary. If he's a Hindu and born a Hindu, he's an Orthodox Hindu. So that's their definition of Orthodox Hindu. My understanding of Orthodox Hindu is, of course, somebody who actually, strictly follows the tenets and principles and conclusions of the Vedas. That would be, in my opinion, a real Orthodox Hindu. Somebody who really understands and applies in his life the knowledge, the wisdom of the Vedic texts, Vedic traditions. So anyway, I tried that gate, and then because I was in the role, I tried all the other 3 gates as well, and by the time I reached the last gate, they were already waiting for me. So I didn't enter the temple. I also didn't have any it wasn't a big drama, nothing. They just didn't allow me to enter, and that was it. So now this time, it was actually really funny, because before I went to Jagannath Puri, I had this thought, it crossed my mind, maybe I should sit in front of the temple with a sign, and say, stop this racial discrimination, against Western Hare Krishna devotees or foreign Hare Krishna devotees from all countries. That was like a thought that crossed my mind, and I was thinking maybe I could attract some media attention, maybe I could give some interviews, So that was, a thought actually crossed my mind that I was actually to some extent seriously planning to maybe do. But once in Jagannath Puri, I was, taking care of making new deities for Germany and chanting a lot and doing so many other things that I didn't really felt inclined to actually, sit in front of the temple with a board and sign, and protest. So, but then just the last day in Puri, sorry, the day before the last day, 26th, yesterday I was still in Puri, and then 26th evening I went to the temple to take my last darshan of Patita Pavan Jagannath, who is merciful to the fallen. He's at the entrance and you can see him from outside. So I took my sandals off and I was offering my prayers to Patita Pavan Jagannath, and one of the priests, he said if I would like to buy some maha from him. And I said, I'm really sorry, but I'm already full, I don't need more Mahaprasadam right now, but what I would like, jokingly I said, is darshan, if he could allow me to go into the temple and take darshan. I just said that. And he, of course, was like, not possible, something like that. And then another priest, he came and said, no, not possible. No, you cannot, because you're not Hindu. So the typical discussion. So I said, well, I actually think I am a Hindu for sure. I follow Sanatana Dharma, and in my case, I even grew up with this tradition. My mother follows this tradition, and then actually in ISKCON, there is a few families already that are in the 3rd generation. So there's 3 or to some extent even maybe 4 generations already in the Western world and of Hare Krishna communities that are actually, certainly born even in this tradition. But even if you're not born in this tradition, there's no reason why you should not be allowed to enter the temple if your actions and qualities are pure. So qualification does not come by birth only. Of course, your birth gives you a certain qualification and opportunities, but it really depends what qualities you bring. Depending on your previous karmas, everybody has individual qualities, that are not necessarily reflecting the origins. So, like in the Bhagavad Gita, it says in connection to the Varnashrama Dharma, Guna Karma Vibhagasaha. So, according to the gunas, the qualities that somebody has, and karma, the work and activities he performs, there are certain positions you can take in society. So, like that, I was trying to convince him that birth is not everything. You have to be qualified, you have to practice, etc. So we were discussing, and in the beginning was like a normal discussion, but then he maybe ran out of arguments, I don't know. He actually spoke English quite well. He started blaspheming Western devotees. He said, no, the Western Hare Krishnas, they're all pretenders, those foreign Hare Krishnas, they chant Hare Krishna in front of the temple, but actually they're eating beef. They go back home and they eat beef. So that misconception was very deeply ingrained, in his perception of Western devotees still. And I was trying to convince him that, of course, that's not true, but he just became more insulting, and he even said, then, this Hare Krishna, something is really wrong with them. It's really, really wrong. There's like one man, he has like 40 women in one bed, like that. So then I said, that's Atmavan Manyate Jagat. No, you are reflecting, it must be somewhere in your consciousness, this, dirt that you projected, upon these Western devotees, because it's not the truth, it's not factual, it's just your opinion and your perception. So like that, the discussion was becoming a little bit more heated, and I was becoming a little bit more frustrated, that this person had this like very deeply ingrained misconception, deep ignorance about the facts, and he was very, adamant and offensive about it. So it became so bad that I became, annoyed. Usually it says, you should try, if somebody blasphemes a devotee, you should leave the place, you should try to, defeat him by argument or cut his tongue. So I didn't cut his tongue, but I smacked my bead bag over his head, because it was really annoying. So I smacked my bead bag over his head, and at that point I was still behind the fence. He's, inside the fence, right next to the Garuda Stamba. So then he came out, and the priest, was an uproar. They called the media, called the police, so then a crowd of people gathered. Like in India, it happens very, very fast. And then within 5 minutes, there were cameras and media was there, and I was giving interviews, and I was explaining my standpoint of view, and he was explaining his standpoint of view, and he was also developing this new story that to some extent became reflected, in the reports. I don't know, of course, everything he said because he was speaking in Oriya, but basically he was, denying that he was, had offended anybody or insulted anybody, and he was basically then portraying me as somebody who was, trying to forcibly enter the temple, and he was, the heroic panda priest who stopped me, and I hit him with a stick. Of course, I didn't have any stick in my hands. I only had my bead bag, which in one sense you could say is a stick broken into beads. So anyway, so that was the situation, how it then developed. Then I had so much, media, and to some extent I was actually happy, because even I didn't plan it at all. My desire to get media attention about this topic was fulfilled. So I was able to give many interviews about this topic, and it resulted actually in that evening, or maybe the next morning, I think that evening, there was a panel discussion in Orissa TV, with I think 4 or 5 panelists, and clips of me and the temple, about the topic of why Western devotees are not allowed into the temple. So it had certainly an impact and has made some waves. Also, if you see, especially the Times of India report, Times of India anyway, it's a newspaper that doesn't have a very good reputation in India. It's a very prominent and powerful media house, but actually generally it's perceived as just reflecting whatever Western media says, like CNN and BBC, and many times the reports are not very accurate, and that was in this case also as well. They even messed up my age and wrote my name wrongly and didn't mention my spiritual name, whereas the Orissa media, the local media, actually they were much more close and more accurate what actually happened, and they didn't portray me as a not too much at least as a temple stormer. They still said kind of like I wanted to forcibly enter the temple, but yeah, that was not the case. Anyway, in the comments you see of the Times of India report, you have all these people that actually are in support. Like I would say the majority of comments I've read, there are around 200 comments. I haven't read all of them, but most of the ones I read were actually in support of taking away this law, which they considered racist or discriminatory against Western devotees. And many say Sanatan Dharma is Vasudeva Kutumbakam. It's encompasses the whole humanity. Everybody, or many different mantras actually have a very Vedic mantras have a very universal approach. Like what is this famous line? Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, so Sarva Lokam, so in every place may everybody be happy and fulfilled, etc. So anyway, Lord Jagannath is of course the word of Lord Jagannath means the Lord of the universe, and that's also something I said in the media, and many people who were around me there, the police, when I said that they actually agreed and were very, they liked that comment. I said, because they asked me for my last thought, my last comment, I said, well, Lord Jagannath is not Orissa Nath, he's not just Indian Nath, he's also not Hindu Nath, he is ultimately Jagannath, he's the Lord of the universe, so it should reflect, in his main shrine that he actually is, Jagannath and not just Hindu nut, you know. Anybody who, no matter if he identifies himself as a Hindu or a Krishna Bhakta, anybody who has, you know, the intention of worship and prayer and is sincere and has good habits should be allowed to enter the temple, 100%. So, well, yes, so I got the chance to give interviews, and what I wanted to just mention as well is that generally we don't have the attitude that we want to barge into the temple at all. So we follow the example of Haridas Thakur, who was very humble, and he did not try to force himself into the temple. Even he was certainly qualified, and he had Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you know, on his side, giving him the position of the Nam Acharya. But still, he was very humble. He didn't, as far as I know, he didn't even try to enter the temple. He was, you know, only taking darshan of the Nila Chakra, and he humbly, you know, chanted the holy names. And this is one thing I want to mention also. One of the policemen, especially, I think he was a major police, he had like extra stars see on his shoulders. He was very nice, and he was encouraging me, you should try to get the darshan in the heart, you know, that's the more important darshan. And it's true, you know, that's the darshan we really want, because deity worship is very important so that we can get an idea, an impetus of worship and practice, you know, the personal relationship with the Supreme. But ultimately, you know, Shyama Sundaram, you can see Shyama Sundara only if your eyes are anointed with real love. You know? When your eyes are anointed with real love within the heart, you know, you see Shyama Sundara, you see Lord Jagannath. You know? So the ultimate darshan is, of course, internal. But still, it's you know, it's a sad situation that they don't allow us to visit the take darshan externally as well. So this Panda, I mean, this policeman, he was very, very learned. He was citing different shlokas from the Bhagavad Gita, and he was very encouraging. And he also arranged for the Panda and me to also officially, you could say, reconcile each other. So the Panda then also repented the whole situation, and so we both wrote actually statements, you know, to the head police of the Singhadwar in Jagannath Puri, official statement. And I said, I'm really sorry for the situation, and I'm really sorry that I, you know, offended the Panda, the Bamadeva Panda, Puja Panda, but I just request that he try to understand the actual position and sincerity of Western devotees. And he also wrote a statement, and the Panda, the policeman, said he will arrange, you know, special darshan when I come back for Ratha Yatra. And the police in general was very, very friendly. I was not actually arrested, like it sounded like I was arrested. I saw even one report in one newspaper in Orissa said, the police said, we will grill him, you know. Probably to appear tough to the public, but they were extremely friendly. There was this lady, she was, you know, very motherly, and she was, you know, taking care of me, and all the policemen were really friendly and nice, and at no point was I put in jail or a cell or anything. I was always at the entrance area, offered a seat, and because for the police it became very soon very clear that actually the Panda had actually also you know, created this situation, and he had his story wasn't consistent. You know, he had a few different. Even I didn't speak Oriya, I could tell from something he said in English that he wasn't very consistent in his story, and the policeman didn't, you know, receive it very well. And my story was very consistent. Anyways, so the Panda also repented, and so we wrote a statement, and then we organized, you know, he said he will, I asked for forgiveness, and he said he will accept me as his younger brother, so, and he will pray for me to Lord Jagannath. So we went in front of the entrance again, in front of Patita Bhavan Jagannath, where everything occurred, and I touched his feet asking for forgiveness, and he embraced me. So ultimately everything had a happy end. And I also hope that this whole situation in general has a happy end, that the temple opens up for Western devotees, because actually it's maybe one of the last main big temples in India that doesn't allow Western devotees to enter, because in South India we have, you know, a few temples from the Madhvacharya tradition and Ramanujacharya tradition where Western devotees are allowed to go inside. they of course don't want just tourists to go and take photos and make it to a tourist spot. So that's, we also agree, the sanctity and the atmosphere of worship should be preserved in a temple, but that's all we want. We want just to go and worship. We don't want to go for, not even taking photos necessarily, we just want to take advantage and darshan of this amazing shrine of Lord Jagannath. So yes, so one last thing I want to mention in this connection, because there's this obvious situation that many great temples, in South India, the greatest of all, Tirupati, Balaji, they allow Western devotees to enter, and the reason is, this is my speculation, conclusion, is that it's because these shrines are run by the Sri Vaishnava tradition, or in the case of Udupi, for example, by the Madhvacharya tradition, which we are philosophically much more in line with. The Krishna traditions of the West, ISKCON, or Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, and more generally, are much more in line with these two traditions, because they, we accept a personality of Godhead and worship and devotion, bhakti yoga, whereas the Advaita tradition of Shankaracharya does not. And Shankaracharya, he was of course extremely relevant in the philosophical evolution of India, to re-establish the Vedic traditions and replacing Buddhist nihilism in India. But we see it from a perspective that it was a mission that Shiva had, that he had to fulfill, but it's not the ultimate conclusion or reflects the ultimate truth of the Vedas. So, but this Advaita tradition is of course still very predominant in India, and many of the mats and peats are like places like monasteries that Shankaracharya established still exist, or probably all of them or most of them, and one of them is the Govardhan Peeth in Jagannath Puri, very prominent. So the Shankaracharya in Jagannath Puri has a lot of prominence, and I've come to hear about it from a few different sources, also while in Puri now, that actually he is the person actually promoting this idea that Western devotees should not go inside. If a Western devotee or foreign devotee in general, doesn't have to be Western, could be African or South American or whatever, not Indian, not Hindu born, the temple becomes contaminated. And I even heard reports that at one point they even threw away all the food, so they wasted, so much valuable food, just because I think an American lady, was a few years ago, 2010, had entered the temple. So then the whole temple had become desecrated and dirty, and now all the food had to be thrown away, everything had to be cleansed. So that's not only ridiculous because it's a waste of food and money and time, but it also reflects this misconception that birth is all that qualifies a person. Certainly not. It's the gunas, the qualities that somebody brings, and more importantly the karma, the actions, the practice somebody has. So this is the situation, and I know he's very respected. The Prime Minister of India, for example, every time he visits Jagannath Puri, he takes darshan of the Shankaracharya, so he's certainly very influential, very powerful person. So I hope there is a way to, I don't know, maybe convince him, to give a different direction, because he is certainly the main person. If he is convinced, if he changes his mind, the general population will also follow, because many of the reporters that interviewed me, they had a very strong stand actually against what I was saying. They were actually very convinced, that not only Hindu-born can go inside. One very educated reporter, even, he seemed like very wealthy, very educated from a respectable channel. He actually was very, politely hearing all my arguments and everything, but then at the end, off camera, he said, off record, I have to tell you that not only Hindu-born can go inside. So even he, has had this very strong conception. So it has to come both ways. Maybe this is not like a, I don't know. It's been talked in maybe in the news or in the comments to some extent, but ultimately somehow this has to come from top down. so that the mass of people really, understands this simple fact that qualification does not come by birth. Qualification comes by the qualities that you bring from your previous birth and the karma, the activities that you perform in this life. So like that, because there is many examples of people who are not, qualified, you could say, in the highest standards in any way. They might not even be interested spiritually in visiting the shrine. No, there might be an atheist. There's like this famous example I heard about a Western devotee who was in front of the temple taking darshan, and this Indian says, "You are stupid. Why are you praying to this God? He doesn't even allow you to enter the temple. I don't believe in him. I don't practice. I eat meat. I do. I eat beef. I do everything I want, and I just come here to see it as a tourist spot. But they allow me to enter because I look Indian. And you, who are are worshiping and praying, they don't let you enter. How could you be so stupid to worship such a shrine, such a temple? So that is the situation. That's the fact. That so many people in different parts of India also, and I know in Kerala also I have a friend, which is nice actually, that was like this Muslim who was actually really inclined to see the deity, and family wise and officially he was actually a Muslim, but he had this friend, they just dressed casually, and he entered the temple, because he had this inclination. He wanted to take darshan. He was actually, devoted, but officially he was a Muslim, So like that, it should not be any discrimination. If somebody has the inclination to worship, he should be allowed into the temple. Because anyways, so many people who are not following any high standards of practice, but are maybe Hindu born, they are allowed to go into the temple. So for sure, Western people who are strictly following, sometimes even for a few generations, should be allowed to enter the Jagannath Temple, and hopefully in the near future that comes true. But having said that, the most important is of course the internal darshan, to work on the spiritual practice, that we have an internal connection to the Supreme. Hare Krishna, Jai Jagannath. I'll show you a little bit around before I close this. So this is it's a very famous temple. There's this Vedic expo with robots and amazing art from different artists. There in the background you can see this famous cricket stadium. So this is in Greater Kailash, or east of Kailash, and there's this famous ISKCON temple, the glory of India. It was actually inaugurated by Vaipaji, Atal Bihari Vaipaji, very prominent prime minister, just a few terms ago. And there in the background, it's also a very famous site, is the Lotus Temple. Very famous temple here in Delhi, very beautiful, very aesthetic. So right in the vicinity of this famous temple is the ISKCON grounds, very beautiful. Nice gardens also. So Jai Jagannath.